So all of a sudden, it was completely unexpected. I went viral. I was popping up on everybody's Apple News feed between the Russian war, 17% inflation, and Fiona Lambert at 60. You have little moments of self-doubt, but you do have to ditch the inner critic. I think there's a fabulous quote. I think it's paraphrasing Henry Ford. It's, if you believe you can or believe you can't, you're probably right. I say comparison is a thief of joy. I think you worry far too much what other people think of you when you're younger. And it is one of the joys of getting older that you worry less what people think.
Welcome to A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up, the podcast. Today, I welcome to the podcast Fiona Lambert. So Fiona is an icon in the fashion industry. She's had senior roles at Jaeger, at M&S, at Next, Asda, Dunelm, River Island. And then she transitioned from being this fashion industry icon into a fitness influencer a couple of years ago. And I know we're going to really be interested in that transition story from her. And in addition to that, she's also written a fabulous book, which I do have on my shelf behind me, which is Invincible, Not Invisible. Fiona, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
It's an absolute pleasure. Looking forward to it, Sam.
Brilliant. So to kick off with, we start back in your younger years. Tell me a little bit about your journey into adulthood and the things you experienced.
So it's quite interesting. People who meet me now, they can't believe I was painfully shy as a child. And it's very interesting to look back. I'm not sure anybody would recognise me now, but there was something in me that probably, even early on, though, wanted to continually slightly push myself out of my comfort zone. I think I probably recognised I couldn't stay like that forever. So, challenged myself slightly to push myself out of my comfort zone. Succeeded and, survived the experience and then went on. I always wanted to go into fashion. I know age 11 I wanted to be a fashion designer, and there's little books actually I used to design there and then. So I was, quite strong-minded. I was, reasonably academic at school, and they wanted me to go on and do the sciences, and, whether it was going to medicine or something, which actually probably would have been my alternate career. But I was so convinced I wanted to go into fashion, and, all of the qualifications I chose went into that. And then I studied at Nottingham, studied fashion. And because I was there, got the opportunity to have an interview at Next, which became my first job and actually was the start of the pivot into my career.
Amazing. So very clear from an early age what you wanted to do. I love the idea that I wanted to go into fashion or I'd have gone into medicine, because they're two quite different things, Fiona.
Oh, funny, yeah. Yeah. I think actually I like people. And I think both in different ways. They're both about people. I don't know whether, I like making people happy, actually, whether that's being well or dressing well, and the confidence that, wearing nice clothes brings you. I think the commonality is the people thing.
Oh, wow. Okay. I hadn't thought of those two together, but yeah, you're absolutely right. So in terms of your journey as you then go through adulthood, tell us a little bit about kind of, you've really successful career in fashion, fitness influencer. Talk me through that journey.
Yes, completely unexpected. So, as I said, I was very lucky to start my career in fashion at Next, which at the time was much smaller. And the founder, George Davis, who is a real, one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the industry. He founded Next, he founded George Asda, he went on to do Peruna at M&S. So he's a real phenomenon in the industry. I was very lucky to work with him at Next at the beginning. And then he got ousted in a boardroom coup 4 years into my time there and left. But I chose to write him a letter. I don't know why, and again, it's something I've sort of encouraged other people to do, this sort of pushing yourself out. He comes and said, I wrote him a letter, said, if you ever do anything again, I'd love to work with you. And 6 months later, he called me and said, I'd like you to join. You can't tell you who it is, can't tell you who it's for, but you can join me as a partner, which as a 26-year-old was incredible.
Wow.
As a chance to invest in the business. And it became George Asda. So I did 10 years there. I then went back to Next as the women's wear director for 7 years, and then back to George to turn George round again and also start George Home. So I love product, I love design, I love building great teams, and I'd like to think it was quite interesting actually during my time there. I sort of compared myself to sort of male bosses who probably had very different skill sets and never saw myself as a whether it was a CEO or an MD. But I did a thing called a Clifton Strength Finder. I don't know if you've ever done it, Sam, but it basically tells you where your 5 strengths are versus other people. And mine were strategic, but it was positivity, maximize, which means you can take anything and make it the best it can be, personalization, which is about how you treat people individually, and the last one was called woo, which is winning others over. So this whole, well, not being to be able to, to be able to communicate a message and a vision in a really engaging way with whoever. And doing those strengths actually was quite a game changer for me, because I stopped comparing myself to other people and think I need to be like them to be successful, and instead dialed up those strengths. So I went on and continued to take opportunities that sort of pushed me out of my comfort zone a bit. I'm a big supporter of. I know a lot of women have a imposter syndrome and worry about taking those leaps about what can go wrong. And I'm very much an advocate of what's the worst that can happen. There's lots of things you can do by pushing yourself. You can learn in the job, you can ask for advice, and I think we often overthink these things and don't take these moves. And then my last role, which was the Managing Director of Jaeger, it was just coming up to my 60th birthday, and I got made redundant. I think it was about just over 2 months before my 60th. And I've always been quite fit, and there was something actually as I was approaching it that made me reflect on how it says what to say your age, because suddenly all of a sudden saying 60 felt like to me like you were naming yourself as older. And my PT challenged me to say, look, why don't we get you into your best shape for 60, and you can be an inspiration for people, because you can show them actually it's not the end of the road. So I took that opportunity, and he suggested pitching the story to Women's Health magazine. And as it was, they didn't follow it up, but it did get followed up by the Times. So all of a sudden, it was completely unexpected. I went viral. I was popping up on everybody's Apple News feed between the Russian war, 17% inflation, and Fiona Lambert at 60. So all of these people were messaging me going, "Oh, you've just come up on my Apple News feed." And then the next thing was, of course, people started, lots of lovely ladies who probably got my message that actually it's never too late and you're never too old, started following me on social media. And then the next thing, I was approached to write a book. So, we're now talking, actually I've literally just turned 62. So we're talking 2 years on. And if you'd have asked me though 2 years ago, would you be sitting here today after a 30, well, you were very kind, you said 30, it's probably 37-year career in fashion, as an author and a fitness influencer and, an inspirational speaker, I'd have sort of laughed, because it would be unimaginable. But it's a hell of a pivot, but I'm loving every minute.
I love it. And I think pivot's such a good word for it, isn't it? Is that it sounds like you've done that quite a lot in your career. Taking that leap of writing to George and saying, I'm here if you ever do anything again, and then pivoting out of Next, which is, as a 26-year-old, that must have been pretty scary leap to take.
Yeah, and I think, as I said, I do a lot of coaching and mentoring, and I do think, as women in particular, we worry more about the mistakes we might make or the qualifications we don't have, rather than all the positive things we've done and all of the things we've achieved, and all of the times we've gone into a situation where you didn't really know the outcome and you survived it, and you come out stronger. So each of those challenges or opportunities that have come along, I've probably had, I'm human, you have little moments of self-doubt, but you do have to ditch the inner critic. I think there's a fabulous quote, I think it's paraphrasing Henry Ford, it's, if you believe you can or believe you can't, you're probably right, which I think is a fabulous line, because I think you have, most of the time you can do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I as I said before, I've got your book and I have read it, and that the challenge that you set, I think having that specific goal and focus, I think, is really important. And then it doesn't matter if you don't get to exactly the end, but you're going in the right direction.
Yeah. No, I think that funny enough, I think I was asked a question about business and goals, but I think setting stretching goals, but stretching goals that aren't unachievable, is really important. I think if you, and I know sometimes you can look at a goal and think it's too much. But I'm sure you've used SMART goals before. Once you break it down into manageable steps,
Yeah.
and then almost like what you've got to do that day. If you want to walking 10,000 steps a day is a great example. Actually, I think if you walk 2,000 steps a day today, and set yourself the goal of 3, well, that is quite a big difference, as a percentage to what you're currently doing. And then, you can go from 3 to 5. And actually, walking is one of the best things you can do as a low impact exercise. It's a fat burning exercise, and it's one of those simple ways of changing what you're doing. And when you look at it like that, it is achievable and it is attainable. And I think that's really important for everybody's motivation.
Yeah, I think you're so right. Those big goals could be really scary, but all of them have individual steps. I have a little plaque in my bedroom that I can see when I get up in the morning, and it says, "You are what you do every day." And to your point, if you do 2,000 steps today, if you just do a few more and a few more and a few more, eventually you'll be doing 3,000 steps a day,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that'll be normal.
Yeah, and I think you've read the book. I talk about preparation and perseverance. I think life is all about choices, and I obviously advocate trying to do 15 minutes HIIT because it's an incredibly good exercise for you, and you burn lots of calories, and it raises your metabolic rate. And I'm sure lots of us sit for 15 minutes scrolling through social media. And actually, you could be doing it for 15 minutes. And we all have appointments in our diaries for our hair or for our nails, and we commit that time to how we look. But booking time in your diary to do some exercise is the best commitment of time you'll have, because you will feel better today, but also you are investing in your future self as well.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So if I take you back to your previous self, if your 18-year-old self could see you now, that young woman who was on a mission to go into fashion, and she saw what you're doing now and your lived experience, what would she recognise in you?
I think I've always tried to do everything I can to make it fun, actually. And and I still think we're all if we do a job we love, actually, it's not difficult to go to work every day. So I think the commitment I had to going into fashion when I was so passionate about it, hasn't changed. And I think it doesn't feel like work, does it, if you're doing something you love? So I think I'm proud of my younger self that I didn't do what everybody else told me to do, and study those medical subjects or whatever. So I'd recognise that. The bit I think bear in mind, I've said I used to be painfully shy, and I probably was still shy even at the sort of my early 20s. I still think I say comparison is a thief of joy. I think you worry far too much what other people think of you when you're younger, and it is one of the joys of getting older that
Yeah.
you worry less what people think. And funny enough, I'm not sure if I'd have enough content. Maybe there is, but I was thinking, somebody said, I was talking about the joy of no, and because I think as you get older, the joy of saying no to stuff that either doesn't bring you value or doesn't make you happy, or you do as a people pleaser, I think is a very it's a fabulous thing that you gain as you get older that
Yeah.
you don't have when you're younger. That sort of worried too much what other people think.
Yeah, you're so right, and it's one of the things I've really reflected on, and what I find really interesting about it is, not only does it not matter what other people think, it's everyone is too busy worrying about themselves, but they're not
Yes.
really thinking about you at all.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Well, I say that as I studied life coaching during lockdown, actually, because I thought I'll use something that actually benefits me in my roles in the future. And classic overthinking is mind reading and worry. You're in your head. And I often tell that to people about when they're in interviews and they come away going, "Oh, they must have thought I was this and that." I said they were probably sitting there thinking, "What am I having for lunch?" You can't mind read.
Yeah, no, completely. So she'd recognise that kind of the sense of joy, the sense of fun, obviously a career in fashion, which is what she'd wanted. What would she be blown away by?
Um, uh, Actually, in fairness, I don't recognise it myself. I'm told it more. It is the impact you have on other people. It's very lovely. I mean, and it's very difficult because as you say, you worried you sound big-headed, which I know you're in a big podcast like that. But when people tell you you're really inspiring, I still sort of have to pinch myself a little bit because it's a hard word to use to describe yourself.
Yeah.
But I know, whether it is I've often challenged boundaries in the jobs I've gone into, which is hopefully why, I've transformed the brands I have, because I've never done necessarily what the people have done before, or whether it's being very vulnerable and open about mistakes I've made or some of the challenges I've had. I've been made redundant 3 times and, and bounced back and, had a successful career, and then had this complete, and through the last time of adversity, had this pivot into this new life, which is a life I'm loving as well. And I think sharing as much your successes, sharing your failures and how you overcome them is hopefully inspiring to people. So that's the bit I think would surprise my younger self and surprises me every day as well.
I think we do, don't we, as we get older. One of the reasons I started this podcast is because I just like speaking to inspirational people, and I always just assumed they had their lives together and they knew what they were doing. And then someone said to me, but like, you're really inspiring. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then I realised nobody knows what they're doing. We're all just making it up.
And I think it's as important as a role model as a woman in business, though, because I do think, I remember in one of my last jobs, I was sitting sketching something in a meeting and said, "Oh, why do we try it like this?" And they went, "You can draw." And often, and I studied fashion, so, and I can still sketch a great dress, but they only see you as the fully formed you that you are today. They don't know. Obviously everything's on, computers and laptops now. My day spent photocopying and, filing, and that's how your career starts.
Yeah.
So.
Earning your spurs.
Yes, exactly.
And as you said, learning to fail.
Yes.
And learning from it.
But I think sharing that is really important.
So on that topic, can you talk me through maybe a rejection or a failure that you've had, maybe the one that you learned from most?
So I think when I was at George and Asda the second time round, they did a reshuffle and made some redundancies. And as part of that, I went up to join the food team. They moved me completely off clothing and said, move up to food development, which I sort of thought, I'll test my leadership skills. But I didn't get up to every day, passionate about developing the baked beans in the can. I just couldn't do it. And I gave it 9 months, and then they were making more redundancies. And so I chose to be redundant rather than go and do a job every day that I hated. And I'd got a great reputation. This was the first redundancy I should have. And I was sort of really confident. I thought, I'm well thought of in the industry. I've done great jobs wherever I'd gone. And then I had this redundancy, and then I started to speak to people. And nothing came of it. And the reality is, the higher up you are in as a position, actually, the fewer jobs there are. So, and everybody had said to me, it'll take 12 to 18 months. But I'm somebody who's used to making stuff happen and making it happen quickly. So, and I was making sure I went to every prospective chat. I was, keeping my finger on the pulse. I was, networking. For every chat you went, I'm professional. I'd, properly research it and have something in my head about, what I would get each job. Gosh, and it was exhausting and very demoralizing. And I learned, and I do share this with people, that I think it's really important that your self-esteem isn't built on your job, or not solely on your job, because it was really hard, and it was, I said to somebody afterwards, it's a bit like a bereavement, actually. You've got this career and all of a sudden that wasn't there anymore, and you're mourning the team of people, what you've done. As I said, your image of yourself changes, and ultimately, whatever, I think it was 11 months later, I started my new role at Dunelm, which was a great role and came through connections. And I think, so that was a really big lesson. And I think I've shared actually posts on LinkedIn about, dealing with redundancy, because you are going to go through this emotional roller coaster. So second time round, actually, that's when I said, well, instead of actually, going after everything. And I had a fabulous quote which helped me, who said, "You can have lion mind or dog mind." And don't know if you've seen this, Sam. So he said, "You can either be like a dog and chase after every stick, backwards, forwards, which
Yeah.
is exhausting, or you can be a lion and you can just sit there surveying the savannah and just go, that's the gazelle I'm going for," or whatever. And it's much more focused. You don't exhaust yourself. So I thought, I'll study life coaching and do something positive with my time instead of sort of chasing after all of the sticks, and wait for the right thing to come along, which it did.
I love that, lion or dog.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, it's a really good way of kind of thinking about
Yeah.
it, isn't it? Kind of the happy, joyous, exhausting, or the
Yeah.
slightly more considered, more targeted. Brilliant, thank you. So lots of decisions get made for us, obviously, over our careers. Some of them we make ourselves, like choosing to be able to be made redundant from George at Asda. What's the best decision you've ever made?
I think writing that letter to George as a 26-year-old, because and it was quite, if you think at the time, he was the managing director, and I think I was I think I was just a time of a buyer, just approaching a buyer manager role. So, but I think that was, again, maybe something I thought it was a bit out of the ordinary, felt slightly uncomfortable doing it, but definitely, working with George for 15 years, who was, like I said, one of the most legendary and inspirational people in fashion retail, and just learning, he had very much there's no such word as can't attitude, and, did set those stretching goals. Made me realise that it's far better to push yourself a little bit harder and maybe not quite get there, but you'll probably go further. There's a quote I'm known for, actually, which is it was a sort of version of something actually I learned from Simon Wolfson, but I always say I'd rather rein in a stallion than drag a donkey. So
I
and
love that.
I think in life, I think it's far better to actually work with people like that. Particularly in an industry like fashion, where staying still is the thing that's the death of what you're doing. So you'd
Yeah.
rather, rein in a stallion than drag a donkey.
That's such a good quote. That's definitely going to make the reels. That's definitely going to make the reels. And I think it is that kind of fortune favors the brave, right? You had nothing to, as you said earlier, like I had nothing to lose, so why not? And nothing could have come of it, or something could.
But I think as well the attitude that even if it goes wrong, it's going to be, you're going to learn something.
Yeah,
I think when I'm coaching people, I say the sort of two irreversible things you can do in life, which is have children and die. And outside of that, you can change most things. You can,
yeah,
buy a house, you can sell it. If you go to the wrong job, you can leave it. Marry the wrong person, you can divorce them. So, it's very, very few things are in life
yeah,
that you can't change.
yeah.
I've
No,
got
completely.
I've got a whole load of quotes for you. So I say to people, be more water, because water always gets where it wants to be, whether it's winding its way around obstacles or through or under, or pouring a channel through it. You can be more water, you'll get to where you want to be.
Oh, I'm loving all the quotes, Fiona. I'm gonna need more things to print up that I can hang in my bedroom. So one of the things as well we always get over our lifetimes, both in business and out, and I love what you were saying about kind of being connected to your job and having a kind of being a whole person outside of your job and your job title, which I think a lot of us don't get to until we get made redundant because we're so attached to it. But it's part of that life journey, especially in business, and you're a life coach as well and work with people. People love to give advice. They love to give advice. We all quite like to give advice or get asked for advice. Some of which is good advice, some not so much. What's the best piece of advice you've been given but that you chose to ignore?
Oh, well, probably actually both work and personally. I've been in situations that I probably should have left earlier. And I think there's one thing being tenacious and resilient, and sometimes if you can't change a situation, the only solution is to walk away. And I think sometimes I've probably let things drag on too long, and other people can see it sometimes easier than you. Um, and you do hit a point where actually you go, actually I can't, and I think I'm a big believer that in most instances you can make something happen, and there's lots of solutions. I'm a doer, I'm an action person, but just sort of 5% of the time you're going to hit something where you just can't change it, however much you are resilient or you're a woman of action.
Yeah.
I think recognising those times and going, now's the time to walk away. So, those are probably, in both personal and business situations, I've ignored the advice from friends, maybe that, it's
So we're at the final question, Fiona. I can't believe we've got to the final question. And hopefully you'll have another quote for us, but we'll see. So as it's called a beginner's guide to being a grown-up, the one question I ask absolutely everybody is, if we turned this into a book, what's the one thing you would put in the beginner's guide to either help your younger self or somebody else?
Oh gosh, I think, well, in one way I've answered that, because I do think comparing yourself to other people, and unfortunately, as I was growing up, there was no social media, and there is all of these external pressures now where you probably are one way or another comparing yourself to other people. So I do think, I would really, I wish that. I also think when you're younger, you are sometimes afraid of asking for help.
Yeah.
And I've learned having a strong network of whether it's business friends or friends, and you often need different friends for different types of thing.
Yeah.
But I think you're never going to do it all alone as you're younger. You're going to keep learning, keep growing, and actually not being scared to ask for help, I think, is something that's really important, and continues to be as you grow up into an adult. You don't have to face into things alone. So you don't have to have all the answers. If you take each day as it comes, you can ask for help when you need it, would probably something I'd add in.
I think that's really powerful. So I think the earlier you learn that, the easier the failures are, the more fun the successes are, because it is a skill. It's like the skill of saying no. It's a skill to be able to be confident enough to say, I don't actually know the answer to this,
100%.
or I need some help or some guidance or just someone else's voice to set against my own. So I think that's really powerful. And I, as I said before, completely agree with you on the, stop worrying about what other people think about you, because they're probably too busy thinking about themselves.
Yes, exactly.
Fantastic. Fiona, thank you so much for your time today. I've loved going through your journey with you and getting some of your quotes and learning a little bit more about what you do, and your fabulous book, Invincible, Not Invisible, which I know is a big success, and I know lots of people will go out and have a read of it now. And follow you on Instagram for your fitness tips.
My kitchen workouts, yes, what you can do in 5 minutes at home.
Yes, we will make sure they're in the show notes. So
Brilliant.
thank you for your time. I know everybody who's listening will have really enjoyed listening to you today. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening to this episode of A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up. If you enjoyed it, please like, follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If there's someone who inspires you that you'd like me to interview, you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram and TikTok. In the meantime, enjoy being a grown-up.